This is going to be your guide to using Palafin in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So here's where you start. 100 hit points, 70 attack, 72 defense, 62 special defense, 100 speed. It's not much, but here's the 0 to hero ability. The Pokemon is Palafin changes to hero mode when it switches out, so you have to be in the battle at some point, leave, come back in, and then you transform into this abomination, but the stats look pretty crazy. 100 hit points are the same, 100 speed is the same, but then you jump to 160 attack and you pick up some bulk along the way. Now that's the problem with Palafin. It's only good after you give your opponent a turn. And to give that opponent a turn, you have a couple of different options. Do you just hard switch and hard -1, or do you go for a flip turn? Now that's going to eat into your coverage. And then you really want priority because 100 speed isn't good anymore. It got power crept a long time ago. We don't have megas, so I kind of like made things weird, but then we just got a lot more fast Pokemon and everyone's running Scarf or has some kind of boosting move. But now that means we don't have any like big oomph move for a stab, and that leaves us with nothing. Like we have one coverage move option, kinda. So this is why I think Palafin is super mega giga overrated. Now it's really good at one thing, stomping Timmies. That if someone is new to the game or doesn't really understand how complex win conditions and the late game gets inside of Pokemon, and they don't know what to do with being gifted a free turn, or they can't identify in Team Select that, yo, they're bringing the Palafin, and you have to find the chance to capitalize on that. Yeah, Palafin takes these stats and it kinda does something with them. Like, it is pretty strong, but there are going to be some weaknesses here, and you have to use Palafin really well. Like, it's not like, oh, you just get a legendary Pokemon, therefore the game is free. No, far from it. And that is kind of where this guide is going to go. That Palafin is only good when used in a very masterful, specific way. So with something like this, yeah, you might see this moveset, item. That's how you can also tell if a Pokemon is in trouble for its identity. Palafin doesn't really know what it wants on an item, because if you're using Choice Band, 100 speed, you're going to get outsped by a lot. Jet Punch can sting, especially with the Choice Band 160 attack. It's like a Scizor is going to be running at you, so that can be pretty strong, but then like you have to really figure out the identity of what you want on the Palafin. If you're running this, you can go into something like the Electric Terra type and knock it completely walled out by water, and bulk water is very common. But then there's Pokemon like Gastrodon. Also, if you have the Terra Blast with this, what do you do against Dragon-type Pokemon? But Palafin wants and needs all of this stuff. If you're not leading off and then flip turning out, you're just handing your opponent a free turn that they can get more out of than whatever this is all tied together. Life Orb gives you the ability to pivot your moves, but then again, your coverage is kind of weird. And it gets even more complex for Palafin from there, because you can also run other options. Like, if anything just hits you with a Will-O-Wisp or burns you somehow, you need the Facade or else you're not doing any damage, and you just lost a Pokemon that also just lost a turn. That's not good. Drain Punch gives you Sustain, which does back up, because, like, okay, don't have to really invest much into the attack to get a lot of damage out. Good amount of hit points, good amount of bulk, so you're not taking a lot of damage, and you have a good pool of health to kind of fill back up with the Drain Punch. Close Combat. Close Combat, if you're running this, you're going to need the flip turn, so once again, compromising something on your coverage in some way. Like, you can't give up priority on a 100 speed Pokemon that's trying to sweep or clean up or revenge or something. So that gets kind of weird. And then like Close Combat, use that to finish off a KO. You really don't want to be taking a hit after that. Also, the Close Combat isn't going to be too ridiculous because it is non-stab. So then you want to kind of, you know, flip turn out. You still have this move even after you've gone through your base Palafin form. And Ice Punch, once again, we get walled by Dragon-type Pokemon, so it's about the team building. You really need to be specific. You kind of have to build the entire team around Palafin, and that's where it gets risky. And that's why I think the Pokemon's overrated. Like I said, you see something like this, and you think it's free, but it's far from that. You need to become a Palafin specialist, and unless you want to be that kind of weirdo, I don't think the investment is worth it. But if you understand every angle of Palafin, every possible win condition and path to victory, then maybe this Pokemon can actually be good. but it's not like playing a style where, you know, if you have multiple cleanup sweepers, multiple setup Pokemon, I'm a tank specialist, a setup tank specialist, so I look for my 1 in, get my 1 stockpile, my 1 curse, my 1 amnesia, game's over. Palafin, you have to find the Palafin win condition, which is a lot more narrow. But you can kind of build into it, so, you know, you lead Palafin and then you flip turn into an Amoonguss. There's not a lot they can do about that unless they predict the Amoonguss, because Palafin can't stay in on these stats. And even like Choice Band flip turn, any kind of flip turn really isn't going to do much. It's like, hey, I'm leading Chip, I'm giving you the turn, maybe I just get more out of going into the Amoonguss. Regenerator effectively negates that damage, but the problem is if the opponent like sees the obvious Palafin strategy, it's too one-dimensional. It's too free and predictable, because it's not like you're just going to become a hero form turn 1 or turn 2 by staying in. You have to leave. You have to give it up. So if the opponent just leads taunt, leads setup, Amoonguss is going to be having a bad time. But if they don't have those options, and you actually get like a good read on when you bring Palafin, when you lead Palafin, then you can get a lot of mileage here. That's a Spore into bringing in your hero form, and then because of the Regenerator, it's kind of like you didn't lose that turn. But then again, like skillful play makes it very predictable how to outplay the Palafin, and then depending on the opponent's team composition, you could have a very bad time with your moveset. Tank Palafin though, where things get a bit more interesting. You have access to the taunt, you have access to the bulk up, you have Drain Punch Sustain, and that's kind of the thing, like Palafin doesn't really have any other forms of sustain except for hitting a non-stab Drain Punch, and like Terra investing on the Palafin, it's all or nothing. If you flop your Terra because you don't have the right type, or your Palafin just is not succeeding into their team, you're down the mega power level gimmick. That's not good. But it is something where if like you get 2 bulk ups, you land a Drain Punch into leftovers, now Palafin is like a multi-hit KO that is very tricky to deal with. As for the last move, it's like you got Wave Crash as a thing, but man, taking Recoil on like a Life Orb moveset, or Choice Banded, I get outsped by a lot of things moveset, it makes it tricky to kind of have all the stars align for Palafin. If they do, feels like there's nothing you can do about the Pokemon as the opponent, but again, it's very narrow win conditions for this Pokemon. So if you don't get red on the taunt, which also is a problem because this moveset shows what the Palafin is. You absolutely cannot run Flip Turn on something that's trying to set up, or else it's just a dead move slot. So if the Palafin behaves funny, the opponent can maybe catch this out and be like, okay, next time he's coming in, he's bulk taunting me. Or if like you somehow tag this Pokemon with damage before it gets to Flip Turn, then you look at it and go, it kind of took damage like it has hit point investment, you know, kind of thing. So the opponent can get a read on you like that. If they predict the taunt, actually run damage into you, that's really bad. It takes time to get set up on the bulk up, and then, like I said, things kind of get weird. Is this where you have Jet Punch as kind of like your in-game? Problem is, it takes 2 bulk ups to double your damage to get the same damage on Jet Punch as it does for the Wave Crash. Now, priority Wave Crash damage is definitely something, but no damage item. Potentially sketchy and weird investment, because you want Palafin to be around as long as possible, absorbing those hits, getting those setups, and then finding out what it can do, just stay on the field forever and have pressure. So I think like there's this weird angle in trying to run bulk up, but then there's other bulk up, curse, setup tank Pokemon that just don't have the baked in 160, but have better sustain and win condition opportunities. The EVs are also something that go all over the place in the weirdest of ways. So base 90 speed, fully invested with a beneficial nature, you're not catching that on just Adamant. 152 at level 50, 156 at level 50. So you can't really cut it in weird ways, and then you're also giving up the extra 60 base power 10% bonus by going off the Adamant nature into Jolly, so like you're just losing stat efficiency right there. Then I was thinking about like the Golden Go matchup, but Golden Go isn't fully investing into speed yet. I don't want to live in that world, and if that world lands, it's going to get extra weird. So things to take into consideration on like specific spreads and speed tiers and common Pokemon that you kind of want to be challenging. Palafin just wants to outspeed it, maybe crush the sub, maybe just do more damage with its bulk than Golden Go can do with a Shadow Ball. Jolly Excalibur speed ties you at max speed with the neutral, so that's some ugliness that comes into the game. Things you need to be aware of if you choose to do something like this, or that's where you have to just give up those stats, find the extra little bit of, oh, it actually gets that weird double jump that we see sometimes, and then figure out where you're putting your stats if you're trying to claw something back on the attack. But then you need hit points, and then it's weird. Like I said, when the Pokemon starts breaking down into a mess, it shows more flaws of the Pokemon, and if anyone says it's good, it's overrated. This is the problem that Dragapult has. Dragapult is a trash can Pokemon. It's a really bad physical attacker because of coverage, it's a very weak special attacker, and all it has is speed, but as we've seen with Pokemon like Electrode, speed doesn't mean everything. Excelgor not seeing a lot of play, Jolteon being kind of a coin flip Pokemon, and depending on what Pokemon your opponent has as their fastest Pokemon, Dragapult might not even be necessary to have that much speed, so it's just bad. It's just some random pseudo-legendary stats with a lot of speed, and then a mess of a move pool, and it ends up just being a complete liability. And this is what I mean about building a team around Palafin, and it's also going to take a lot of losses to get to that point where you understand Palafin very well, where it's like, okay, which Pokemon are bodying me? I mean, if you're looking at a moveset like this, Amoonguss also wrecks you. It helps build up your team, but it also wrecks you. Like I said, Bulky Water, that's in a lot of places. Dondozo, it's unaware, so this moveset just ignores you and then hits you with a fissure, and eventually you're going to lose. Terra Dragon ruins you, and then depending on whatever Terra shenanigans are happening with an opposing Pokemon, yeah, Palafin doesn't really have that great of a time, but let's go into damage calculations just to make sure. Jolly Palafin with no item versus a timid Jolteon with no item. So Jolteon does not have the raw damage to reliably KO on the Thunderbolt. Jet Punch also doesn't have the damage. Now, Choice Band starts to add an interesting layer to this because we find the chance to KO, and if you're banding on priority, you have to go all in with that Adamant Nature, so that's where we can actually trade on the Jolteon, and not even a Sash will save this matchup. The Liquidation was there just kind of like show where the little bit of extra damage goes without wrecking yourself on a Wave Crash. Like, Life Orb Wave Crash, yeah, it's a lot of damage. You don't really get to do that too much, so you have to play Palafin very specifically, and I think that's the thing. You have to put the right moveset, you have to put the right Palafin on the right team with the right goals. If you want it to sweep, gotta build your team that way. If you want it to wall break, gotta build your team that way. If you want it to set up, gotta build your team that way. Even though this is a moveset guide and a guide on how to use Palafin, like I said, that's so very specialized that I can't show you all of that in a single video. This video is mostly considerations, ideas, and acknowledgements so that you don't get timid and go, but Smogon banned it, so it must be good, when actually the Pokemon at its core is below average, and then depending on how you play it, it can easily be bad. So yeah, Jolteon matchup is a thing. If Jolteon has Life Orb, if Jolteon has Specs, and it's not getting one-shot by the Choice Band Jet Punch, then Jolteon is taking this, and remember, you had to give up a turn to get into this position. And if it doesn't have Jet Punch because of the moveset coverage issues, then you're in a really bad spot. That's what I mean, like dedicating. If you're a wall breaker, then you are just a wall breaker. You don't have that priority unless you are building into it very specifically. Let's see where Palafin's damage is, because 160 is good, but you can only make it really good off of the Wave Crash, and it depends on the item. And like, that's so weird, where Jolly 100 base speed Pokemon using 120 base power move on 160 base attack with a Life Orb, yeah, it actually gets like the KO chance on a Silvally, and that's good. Like, we go by damage analogs when we're trying to do these damage calculations and finding a Pokemon's power, and it's usually stab 100 plus base power move with some kind of boosting to get you to the point where you're actually able to pretty much take out any average Pokemon, and then Silvally is going to be on that upper end of bulk, so if you're KOing it or putting a lot of KO pressure onto it, that's a good thing. But if the meta ever really speeds up, Jet Punch kind of falls behind, Palafin gets whittled down, and then maybe it like blows something up, takes some recoil off the Wave Crash with Life Orb, then just gets outsped and goes down. So it's an interesting 1-for-1 that puts you a turn behind. But I guess if you're kind of in that game state, maybe the turn neutralized and you're able to bring it back. So then that leaves me with like, okay, what are some other analog Pokemon? We have Scizor, 130 attack, Adamant, Choice Band, Technician, Bullet Punch. It just does all these things. It has a lot of bulk as well, so it's very comparable to the Palafin. How much damage do we do to Silvally? Two-shotting it with the Bullet Punch, and then two-shotting it with the Jet Punch. So that's kind of like a thing that makes the 160 attack interesting. In certain matchups, it's still a two-hit KO. It's 2-hit KO to 2-hit KO. That's also where like weird life orb, non-life orb, banded, non-banded damage calculations come into play. Try to pay as much attention to this as possible. That's still a lot. Like, that's going to wreck a lot of Pokemon, as we saw with the Jolteon. And the rest of the damage numbers check out, because Technician, Bullet Punch, Scizor, that's going to pull your 40 base power into a 60 base power move. So now we're just dealing with the raw difference of 160 attack on that 460 attack, with the 130 becoming 400. However, damage calculations get a bit funnier at level 50 by doing slightly more damage. So numbers and shenanigans right here. The only other difference being that Bullet Punch is a way better move than Jet Punch because of the typing. Jet Punch is just like water into the rest of your hard water moveset, has a lot less usability and a lot less reliability than the Bullet Punch on a Scizor. As you can see, the numbers are close. Scizor's kind of two-shotting everything on Choice Band, finding specific one-shots and stuff like that. Jet Punch does make up the difference in some weird ways. A Pokemon like Espeon, so that kind of like the lower end, 65 hit points, 60 defense. Jet Punch finds the KO. Bullet Punch does not most of the time. So what it shows on the 160 attack is that it does break the thresholds. I think like 140 on an offense is kind of where like those weird, you're mostly just 2-hit KO everything start to fall apart. And with Palafin, we can see like if you're all in on the Choice Band, sweeping, that's kind of it. And maybe that's just it. You just build a team to clap water, and then your Palafin comes in, and it's all about the Choice Band Jet Punch. You have to give up something to get there, and I don't know after that. Because now you have a Choice Banded regular Palafin to open. It's 70 attack. That's not going to be a lot. It's going to get outsped in certain like sweepy, you know, snowbally kind of opens, and you really never see the Choice Scarf on this, because then that's when all of your damage falls apart, as we saw with that Jolteon matchup. So it's not like 160 attack is super magical in that like, oh, I don't need any damage buffs to make this work. You still do. Actually, didn't Megas teach us this? Because like Mega Beedrill and some other Mega Pokemon, they kick high into the offensive stats and even like crazy into the speed stats, but then when you don't have a Life Orb and you don't have an item, and you effectively poured your item into the stats, oh, and it just doesn't KO enough, and then there's still vulnerabilities to that Pokemon, and then it gets revenged or just gets tanked and then KO'd. But I still think the best way to run the Palafin is that you want to go Choice Band, and that means you're just hard switching this thing out when it first comes into the game into something that doesn't care. If you get away with that, come in on this Pokemon's bulk, and then just try to run over everything, two-shot things, make it to where the opponent can't bring in their sweeper because it's frail, and that's a one-shot risk, then you are finding the most success on Palafin, which means we need to optimize the tankiness. So what is better on the Palafin? Split defenses or all in on the hit points? So we have multi-attack 65.1, multi-attack 70.9 on physical and then special. So 65 and then 71 effectively. Get rid of this, go 252, and 62-68. These are considerations I like making just to make sure you're getting the most optimal thing possible. There's been weird scenarios, like if you've randomly survived on 1 hit points, or if the damage calculations showed like, oh, it was a 20% chance you get KO'd there, if you actually had like proper 100% mathematically optimal EVs, that could have just been like a 100% chance to survive, or a better chance to survive with the 1 hit points and win the game. So that also shows on the bulk up moveset, you're better off going max hit points, however you decide to land on the attack, and then like pad in some special and hit your speed tiers, whatever. When it comes to like what you want to do with Palafin, I think this is the moveset. The coverage is only there for those really wonky in-game scenarios where the opponent has blank, Palafin's coming in, and all it needs to do is land the one super effective hit to land the game because nothing else matters. Or you're like predicting the opponent's last 2 Pokemon where, okay, he's got Toxapex in the back, but his current Pokemon in front of me has 40% hit points, so it dies to Zen Headbutt, and then I'm ready and I'm just locked into my next move for the final Pokemon that needs to go away. That's why we have the Zen Headbutt here, because that's kind of the only thing you have against the Toxapex. Ice Punch can hit the Amoonguss, but then Zen Headbutt turns into more damage. Also, chance to flinch, always good. Drain Punch for if you're feeling that bulky slog come up and you're just like banding, healing, trading with some kind of tank Pokemon, or if the opponent has like 2 sweepers left, you take the hit, boom, Drain Punch it back, take the hit, boom, Drain Punch KO, take the hit, boom, Drain Punch KO, you win. all off of the choice band. So again, let's kind of playing it like a water Scizor that has different damage matchups at worst initial like main coverage or main priority coverage, but it costs you a turn. So I mean, if you just go into that straight up, Scizor going Swords Dance Lumberry breaks this amount of damage, like you just get more damage on the Scizor, and then you can just kind of absorb whatever the opponent might try to like set up into you, or you just do better on setup because you're now a Swords Dancing Scizor. Any bulky Pokemon that tanks this thing and Will-O-Wisps it, so like a full defense tank that has that kind of gimmick, just kind of removes and trades an entire Pokemon, and at the cost of you being a turn behind. I might sound like a broken record, but it's important to note that I don't understand how any loser or someone bad enough at the game thinks this thing is worth banning, because you have to give up a lot for a one-dimensional Pokemon. But as we saw with Pokemon Sword and Shield, one-dimensional Pokemon like Darmanitan and Dracovish that are actually just really bad noob trap Pokemon got a lot of praise for no reason. But I do find Palafin interesting as a challenge, not interesting as a design. Like, I would also just straight up like this thing and cheer for it a lot more if it didn't look so terrible. Game Freak, call April Fools, mulligan, delete it, redo the design, and then maybe there would just be more desire to wanting it to work. But yeah, like, a Pokemon that is easily bad, that can be invested into being more reliably good. So if you guys enjoy the video, hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much for watching.